This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.
Hey love, welcome to Confidently Cherished. My name is Keshia Rice. I am a dating coach and hypnotherapist. I help women learn how to heal from generational trauma and learn how to create healthy, loving, cherished relationships. And today is a little bit different for the podcast because we are doing an Ask Keshia. I've actually been wanting to do this for a while, answer questions that have been sent to me, because I think these questions that I get sometimes are helpful to everyone, not just the person who asked them. So today, I'm not going to read the message that was sent to me because it has a lot of identifying details. And I told this person that I was going to answer her question with a podcast episode, but I also promised her that I was not going to put all of her business out there, right? So just to give you the gist of the situation, she asked me, how can she get over an ex? And if you can hear the background noise, I am so sorry. There are idiots in my neighborhood right now trying to show off their new motorbikes or motorcycles or whatever. So I apologize if you can hear that. But this woman wrote to me. She said that she had been in a relationship for several months and the relationship is over with. They've broken up. But she can't seem to get over this person that she was dating. And the situation that she is in is a situation where, again, without giving away too much information, without putting her business out there for the world, she's in a situation where she can't physically escape her ex. This is someone that she still has to see on a regular basis. And she said that that is making this situation and this breakup that much harder. She doesn't know how to really move on. So we are going to talk about how to get over an ex today. And, this is something that can be really difficult when someone has come into your life and they've made some type of impact. And this has been someone that you were close to, that you had an intimate relationship with. And when I say intimate, I don't necessarily mean that you were physically intimate, that you had sex with them. But, this could be someone that you had a lot of emotional intimacy with. And when you have a relationship like that, and it ends, it is a grieving process. You do want to take time to grieve that. Oftentimes on this show, I try to share my personal experiences with you. And it was very interesting for me because, to be perfectly honest with you, I never had a situation where I had this issue with an ex-boyfriend. My past relationships ended and I was able to move on fairly quickly, honestly. I did, however, before you say something like I can't relate, I can. I did, however, have this situation with a male friend of mine, actually. It was a situation years ago where I was friends with this guy. And even though he and I never officially dated, it was one of those situations where at the time, I had convinced myself that he and I would have been perfect together, right? Despite not not having that evidence because, again, we were friends, but we never officially dated. And I remember when our friendship ended because of circumstances, it was as if it had been a breakup. It was very hard for me to get past all of this thinking of what could have been, right? And we will talk about that in a future episode about, how to avoid falling for someone without having the proper discernment, without really having assessed that relationship. Because, in the case of my story, this was not someone that I actually dated. And in the case of this woman who's written to me, she says that they did not date very long. And I find, interestingly enough, with my clients, it is often these types of relationships that are the hardest to get over. It is not always necessarily the clients I have who are getting out of marriages, or really long-term relationships. And I think part of the reasoning for that, honestly, is if someone leaves a relationship after being in it for a very long time, they're past the what could have been. They know what could have been. They lived it, and they know that what they had hoped for going into their relationship most definitely was not going to happen. Whereas if someone was in a relationship that was shorter term, or even if they didn't actually date the person, but they thought this could have been a great relationship, there's so much potential still in the air, right? There's so much of what could have been, that there's so much unknown that it makes it harder to get over the relationship. One of my favorite movies on relationships is a movie that Chris Rock was in years ago. It's called I Think I Love My Wife. And in the movie, there's a scene where he's talking about, if you take any couple that's married and they end the relationship, take how long the relationship lasted, divide it by 2, and that's how long they've really been breaking up. So if someone was married for 10 years before they divorce, the relationship really ended 5 years prior. And it's so true, because particularly women tend to not leave relationships until every avenue has been exhausted, right? The dead horse has been beaten before they leave. And this is why women tend to end long-term relationships and have an immediate glow up, because, we get out of relationships. By the time we've left, we have already mourned the end of that relationship. That relationship is ended. We've come to accept it. We did our healing process while still within the relationship, oftentimes. Obviously not in the case of this letter writer. So back to the message that she sent me, because I definitely just went off on a tangent there, and we will pin that for another episode. But let's talk about, how is it that you get over an ex? So the first thing that you need to do when it comes to getting over your ex is thinking about this ex. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but I want you to stay with me here. First of all, there is no such thing as a negative emotion or a negative feeling, right? We've talked about this before, about how things like jealousy and anger are simply pointing you to better ways of thinking, really getting clear on what it is that you want in life, understanding what needs to change and what needs to stay, all of those things. So too often we get in these cycles of convincing ourselves that we're not supposed to think about something. We're not supposed to care anymore. We need to get over it. And the more we try to force ourselves to get over it, the more we end up thinking about it. So the first thing I would challenge you to do is go ahead and think about that relationship. Journal about it. Get your feelings down. let it all out, right? If pen and paper journaling does not work for you for whatever reason, then, I have clients who keep video journals. So they use Zoom or some other type of video recording software, and they record their feelings on video and save it, and go back to it later. I have friends and clients who use audio for this. So they use the Notes app on their phone, the Voice Notes app, actually, and they use that to record their feelings. I've actually done that myself before, and it's very helpful. It's very therapeutic. Also, if you have a busy schedule and you know that you need to be journaling and getting your feelings out, then using the Voice Notes app is very helpful, because, you can do it while you're getting dressed or while you're in the car. You don't have to necessarily take pen and paper and spend that time doing it. So Voice Notes works. Also, the regular Notes app. This is something else that I use and that I've had my clients use before for journaling. If they say, well, I'm busy and I don't have a lot of time, well, fine. Make a commitment to yourself that whenever you plan to go on social media, for example, before you open Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, that you will take 1 minute to just go into the Notes app and talk about how you're feeling. 1 sentence, 2 sentences, 2 sentences. How are you feeling right now? And that can be your micro journaling, right? So when you are healing from a breakup, you need to get these things out there. You need to get your feelings and your emotions just out there. Allow them to have their due space and consideration. So once you do that, accept yourself, love the emotions that you're feeling, and not judge yourself. You also want to think about this relationship in terms of debriefing. So the relationship is over with. Now what? What did this relationship teach you? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about other people? In my case, with this guy who was a friend of mine, I learned that I had a hard time being vulnerable in romantic relationships. And that is why I had allowed myself to get so close to this guy friend of mine. Because there was a part of me that always knew he and I would never really have a romantic relationship, right? So because a part of me knew that, I was completely and fully myself with him. I wasn't worried about him judging me and not liking me as much. And because of that, because I allowed myself to be so vulnerable with him, I made our relationship closer in my mind than it actually was. And I had developed this strong attachment with him. Whereas if I had put that same energy towards my romantic relationship at the time, that relationship probably would have, been a lot better than it ended up being. And obviously no regrets, because, if I had stayed in that relationship, then I wouldn't have met my husband probably. But it taught me that I was not putting enough vulnerability, femininity. I wasn't allowing that to happen in romantic relationships the way that I should have. It also taught me that I was putting too much stock in friends, and I wasn't checking with my friends and giving them the capacity or seeing if they had the capacity to handle some of my emotions. Like I had a tendency to just vent. that was actually one of the things with this male friend of mine, is that he and I reconnected later on and just kind of had a conversation about things. And he told me that there were times where he was going through things himself, and I would come to him with my own problems, and it just felt very heavy, and it felt one-sided as well, that he didn't feel like I necessarily always gave him the space to tell me what was going on in his life. So I learned a lot from that relationship about handling other people's emotions, how I share, how I allow myself to be vulnerable and open up. And I learned a lot about what it meant to be a better listener, be a better friend, or what it meant to hold space for others. So I say that because if you are getting over a relationship, it is important that you understand what was the gain from that relationship. What was the purpose? Some people are only supposed to be in our lives for a season, and life gets easier when you understand that. Life gets easier when you understand that some people are only meant to be in your life for a season, and you understand what the purpose of that season was and how it helps you towards your greater purpose. You should also debrief what that relationship taught you about what it is that you want in future relationships, romantic and otherwise, and how you can be a better person in future relationships. So that's the first thing that you want to do to get over a breakup is to think about the relationship. And I can tell this is already going to be a long episode because we are 16 minutes in and I'm only on number 1. But number 2 is you want to reclaim yourself. So whenever we are in relationships, we lose a bit of ourselves. And this isn't necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, just the same way your feelings and emotions aren't necessarily good things or bad things. They're things. It's just something that happens. Because talking about capacity, if you are in a committed relationship with someone, you have less time for yourself just by default because you have this person that you're spending time with, right? And when you're in a healthy relationship, that is a sacrifice that is worth making. You learn how to find that balance. But if you are in a relationship and that relationship has ended, as you re-enter your single season, you want to think about what were the things that were lost. And you want to go about possibly reclaiming some of those things. I say possibly, and we'll get to that in a minute. But if while you were in this relationship, you, for example, had less self-care time, you want to start reclaiming that again. Hopefully, you did the right thing and you didn't ditch your friends completely while you were in a relationship. But yes, when you're in a relationship, you do spend less time with your social circle. So you want to be more intentional again about, you don't want to do this in a cruel way or a harsh way, like, oh, I ditched you losers because I had a man and now like I'm single again, so let's hang out. Like, that's not the attitude you want to take. But you do want to have an attitude of, if you genuinely missed people, if you really want to, if you feel like you had some friendships that weren't quite as close and you would like to rekindle that, you should go to that person and you should be honest about, hey, I know you were busy with things. There were things happening in my life. We didn't spend as much time. I would like to find some of that closeness again if it's possible. And if it's not, then you also need to respect that. If you were in a situation where a friend feels like you ditched them, and they now don't trust you wanting to be close again, you also have to respect that. You can work on doing your best to earn their trust, and you may have to accept that it's time for you to find some more friends as well. But you want to work on reclaiming those parts of yourself, because that will be a boost to your self-esteem. Number 3 is you need to get into your body. The women that I work with, the women who tend to be attracted to me, are very high achievers. And part of being high achievers and having all these great goals and ambitions is that they're also often overthinkers. So, your name, who the woman who wrote to me asking me about getting over an ex that prompted this episode. I'm going to call you Caroline, because again, I don't want to put your business all out there. So Caroline, I'm assuming that you tend to get a lot into your head, because again, you're attracted to me. And I understand the women who work with me because, I'm you, but, further along in my development journey, basically. So I know that you have spent a lot of time thinking about this relationship. You spent a lot of time thinking, what if this, what if that? Maybe I should have said these things differently, done these things differently. Maybe I shouldn't have met this guy at all. Like if I had done this instead on the night that we had met, then my life would be different. I wouldn't be so heartbroken. All of these different things, right? And yes, I know I started this episode telling you that you need to think about the relationship, but there's balance, right? There's only so much thinking that you can do. And thinking is I don't want to say thinking is a masculine trait, as in like only men have brains, but the whole like structure of plotting out scenarios and doing a whole bunch of analyzing and all of that is very masculine, whereas feminine energy is more about flow, and allowing and receiving and embodying. So, we have to have this balance between our masculine and feminine energies. So once you've done the thinking, you've done the journaling, you've done the analyzing, you're clear on the lessons that you've learned, you're clear on the parts of you that you want to reclaim now that this relationship is over, it is time for you to get out of your head and into your body. So how that is best going to work for you. This could mean taking walks. This could mean taking a fitness class. I personally do Pilates. We had an episode a couple months ago, actually, with flat belly Pilates, and we were talking about, embodiment and the importance of, getting into your body and getting out of your head and allowing yourself to let your emotions flow. So find some type of physical activity that allows your body to process these emotions that you're dealing with right now. Again, it could be walking, it could be a fitness class, it could be dance. If you do nothing else but find a playlist on YouTube or Apple Music or whatever and just dance and shake out the feelings, do that. If you head to my Instagram or my TikTok, I did a whole series on the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And unfortunately, I don't have enough followers on TikTok for that to be its own playlist, but if you scroll, you will see videos that have that book as the background. And it talks about this very thing, about one of the ways that we deal with trauma and process trauma is through moving our bodies. And, it may not seem like a breakup is a traumatic event, but, there's big T trauma, the trauma people normally talk about, so assault, some serious illness, being in a major wreck. And then, we have these little traumas too. And there are things that come from everyday life and everyday disappointments, but they can add up and they can weigh heavily on you as well. So it's really important that we allow our bodies to regularly process those things through physical movement. Exercise is incredibly important. And I say that as someone who has always, quote unquote, hated exercise. But I know from the past few months of doing Pilates that mentally I am so much better now that I have been making this commitment to move my body more. So that is the third thing you want to do. And the final thing that I want to give you for this episode, at least, we can talk about this more in the future. But Caroline, you and anyone else listening, I want you to create the new version of you. So Caroline 2.0, right? Now that you have had this experience, now that you have learned what it is that you want and need in a relationship based on the lessons from that relationship, the you that gets those things, what is she like? So back to my example, I learned when that friendship ended and I was so heartbroken over it. I was really into that guy at the time, right? And one of the things that I struggled with when our friendship ended was that I had never really told him how much I was into him. And it left me for a while wondering, like, if I had just spoken up, could there have been something more there? Could things have turned out differently than how they ultimately turned out? I also mentioned to you earlier about vulnerability and how I recognized when that friendship ended that, again, I was not so great at being vulnerable in my romantic relationships and in letting men in. So when I started to think about Keshia 2.0, the new me after this relationship ended, one of the things that I told myself was that this woman, this version of me that is happily married, has an appropriate balance between being guarded and using her discernment and knowing when to open up and be vulnerable, right? So, I was not going to be, as I went out and dated and tried to, find the person who eventually became my husband, I knew that I wasn't going to overshare. I knew I wasn't going to tell my entire life story on the first date, right? But I knew I also had to learn how to open up appropriately. I knew I had to get to a place where I could trust a man to hold space for me, to hold space for my feelings, to not judge me, to be there, to be someone that I felt okay confiding in, that I could create that emotional intimacy with. So I had to learn how to find that balance. I also had to learn to, for someone who had trouble being vulnerable, I also had trouble with, speaking up and talking about my needs and everything as well. Again, when that friendship ended, I spent a long time wondering about, hey, if I had told him I was interested in him as more than a friend, what could have happened? So, it became important for me to recognize that that newer version of me, could talk about her feelings, could talk about her needs, right? Could talk about her wants. That new version of me didn't settle, right? So if I wanted to be in a committed relationship, then I wanted to be in a committed relationship. I wasn't going to lie in front and pretend that I was okay with something casual when I was not. That new version of me also, learned how to be a little bit more independent, because the other thing that made me feel some type of way about that friendship was it had gotten to be very codependent. And not only was I confiding in him so much, emotionally, but he had also become like a large part of my social calendar as well, right? So when that friendship ended, I was also left with like not a lot of things to do because I did so many things with him. And, I had to learn how to once again embrace having my own life and having my own thing going. Something that even now as a married woman, I am still very intentional about having my own life, my own hobbies, my own friends, because I love my husband, but I do not want to put that pressure on him for him to be all things to me. So, Caroline, I would really encourage you right now to start thinking about this new improved version of you. What does she look like? How does she act? What are her hobbies? What are her interests? And how is she embracing this new season of her life? So these are my tips, my guide, if you will, for how to get over an ex. And let me know what you think. What insights did you have? What aha moments did you have? Share them with me on social media. I'm at Keshia Rice on Instagram, on TikTok, and on YouTube. And also, if you have a question that you'd like me to tackle in an episode, I will probably be sending out something to my email list. So those of you who get emails from me, just look out for that so that you can ask questions that way. And then otherwise, you can DM me on social media and I might feature your question in an episode. I typically do not answer DMs anymore because I get so many, honestly. But I usually, or let me clarify that, usually I don't write you a long personalized response. I will make that content. I will make that a video or a Instagram post answering your question. So I would love to do that for this podcast as well. So yes, I'm at Keshia Rice, or if you're on my email list, look out for an email from me and we can talk about your questions here. I will talk to you soon. Love you so much. Bye. Hey there. So you made it all the way to the end of the episode, which means I have two things to say. One, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And two, you like me. You really like me. So I would appreciate it if you would show that like by subscribing to this podcast so that more people can hear about it and enjoy it as much as you do. And if you want to know more about any of the links that I mentioned on this episode or any guests that I've had, be sure to go to KeshiaRice.com/links. That's KeshiaRice.com/links. I can't wait to talk to you again in the next episode. So see you then.